Connie Hedegaard, she's the Danish Minister of Climate and Energy and the President of COP15, and Mr. Yvo De Boer, Climate Secretary of the United Nations. Please, Connie.
Thank you very much. We've just concluded 2 days of pre-COP meeting, and I must say that it has been a very constructive pre-COP. Ministers realize that we're coming close to the deadline. That is definitely sort of the feeling in the room. And I also think that the feeling in the room, where we have spent the last 30 hours or something like that, is heard from my chair. That is definitely a sense of responsibility to take care that this process does not continue forever. We have dug into the most difficult areas, and yet we have done so in an atmosphere of trust and willingness to seek solutions and to try to find compromises. So I must say that the spirit has been very, very good and lays a very fine foundation for the next few weeks running up to the COP itself. We have sort of dug into what should developed countries deliver, the finance issue, what kind of action should be expected from developing countries. In other words, some of the most difficult issues to discuss in a very representative group of ministers. And also we have had quite some substantial discussion on the adaptation framework and what that could look like. Let me say it very, very briefly, but also I hope very, very clearly, that the Copenhagen Agreement must, with credibility, set the world on the path towards limiting global warming to not more than a maximum of 2 degrees Celsius. That is our overall aim. And therefore, Copenhagen must deliver binding commitments on ambitious targets for industrialized countries for 2020, and that is individual targets. Actions from developing countries, actions when it comes to mitigation, short-term finance as well as long-term finance, and we must also agree on the governance structure for that. We must have an adaptation framework, there must be a technology framework, and there must be enhanced capacity building. That is basically the elements of what will in the end sort of be the Copenhagen package. There we'll have a strong set of decisions on how to immediately and rapidly implement all parts of the Bali Action Plan. So just to be very clear, some have sort of misunderstood that maybe they're just doing a partial agreement. That is definitely not our plan. Our plan is to deliver answers on all the major elements. It is also our very clear plan to try to get a mandate for a near-term deadline to turn all of this into a legal form. In other words, it should not just continue forever after. There must be a deadline. This is when we translate this into a legal form. So let me be very clear. Half agreement is no agreement. We must deliver on all this, and I must say that my feeling from the recent 30 hours is that there is a very, very strong will to try to deliver on this. Of course, there are still many pending issues to be solved, but I'm encouraged by the determination ministers have shown to get this done, and to get it done now. For a long time, we've been building up pressure on politicians for them to deliver. And my feeling after these 2 days is that now this pressure starts to result in the political will to get it done. Let me just finish by mentioning just a few examples of how this deadline is already working. We heard yesterday of the new Brazilian target, 36 to 39% deviation from business as usual. South Korea today presented also an ambitious target, 30% below business as usual by 2020. And recently we had Japan, Indonesia, Mexico, Australia, Norway, a whole set of countries starting to respond to the deadline set back in Bali in 2007. And then today, President Obama, after his meeting with President Hu Jintao, said it very clear that in Copenhagen we must have an accord that covers all of the issues in the negotiations and one that has immediate operational effect. In other words, the deadline starts to work. People feel that it is now, and that is sort of the sense of the meeting we just had, and I thought it was a very, very constructive meeting that only sort of gives us the encouragement for the next months of very hard negotiations. Ivan, please.
Thank you, Connie. This has been the last opportunity for ministers to meet before the climate change conference convenes here in just a couple of weeks' time. So the last opportunity for ministers to give direction to their negotiators, the last opportunity for ministers to make clear what they want to see come out of Copenhagen. And at this gathering of meetings, ministers really have signalled a very strong desire to succeed and to make Copenhagen a real turning point. As the minister indicated, the Copenhagen conference can and must record, in black and white, ambitious industrialized country targets. Secondly, the scope and extent of developing country engagement. Thirdly, clarity on short and long-term finance to support adaptation and mitigation in developing countries. And fourth, to indicate how this money is to be managed and deployed. Now, Copenhagen can and must deliver an agreement to make all parts of the Bali Action Plan rapidly operational. Action to help the most vulnerable to adapt immediately is essential. And Copenhagen can and must also deliver real action, beginning on the day that the conference closes. That is why Copenhagen will be a turning point where talking about action stops and taking action begins. We still need more movement. Industrialized countries must raise their targets and financial commitments further to meet the scale of the challenge. And I look to the United States for a numerical midterm target and a clear commitment on finance. As the minister indicated in Beijing yesterday, President Obama confirmed that he supported a comprehensive climate change agreement and one that has immediate operational effect. Almost every day now, we see new commitments and pledges from both industrialized and developing nations. As was mentioned, Brazil and South Korea came with important targets in the course of this meeting, and we were also told of an important generous offer to provide financial support from Japan. The political leadership that so many leaders promised at the UN Climate Summit in September is alive and is well, and it will lead us to success in Copenhagen. Thank you.
Now time for questions. If you could start by introducing yourself and please specify who you are posing the question to.
Yes, my name is Hans Frankfurt from Danish TV2. Mr. De Boer, do you agree that the talk of a Copenhagen Treaty is no longer on the table? It is now a Copenhagen Agreement. And Mr. Hedegaard, what is your response to the developing countries that are saying that's simply not acceptable?
Well, I would say that we're still talking about a Copenhagen Treaty. It's just that we're not going to be able to finalize it entirely in Copenhagen.